Hello. Hello, everyone. I'm Jenny Thomas, Director of External Affairs and Insight here at IWFM. Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by the Technology Special Interest Group. And today's is the third in a series of 3 webinars run by the SIG, exploring the changing digital landscape. In our first episode on the 8th of May, we looked at the tools available to shape and transform that landscape. Then on the 22nd of May, we looked at building digital skills for the modern workplace and facilities manager. Both great discussions, and you can catch the recordings via our website if you missed them. And welcome back, and thank you if you stayed with us for all 3. In all cases, and today is no exception, I'm joined by a panel of experts to work through the questions and issues raised by each theme. Today's session is all about empowerment for you and your organisation, supporting you to know and to navigate the standards and initiatives shaping digital expectations in workplace and facilities management, helping you to engage more confidently with digital tech so you can be aligned to best practice, you can minimise risk in your organisation, and you can drive value and performance. Really important for the FM opportunity. So we've called it the informed client, how standards and industry change are driving digital best practice. And for the next hour, this will be our focus. And just to expand on that, we'll look at 4 aspects of this topic with our panel: the standards and initiatives redefining digital expectations in FM, how organisations can align with best practice to minimise risk, ensure value and really drive performance, the shift from reactive supplier-led models to proactivity and data-informed client leadership, and I'll be unpicking what that is with the panel, and then practical tools and pathways for clients, for you to engage more confidently with digital technologies from BIM to AI, and we will also take your reflections and Q&A. So, a quick outline of how we'll run. Starting with standards, we'll begin by gauging your awareness of the standards and frameworks that are around. We'll do that via a quick poll, which we'll reflect on with our experts to understand what they are and how they're resetting digital expectations. We'll work through ways that organisations can align with best practice to minimise risk, drive value and performance, and we'll tap into the shift I think this panel will argue needs to happen to move from reactivity to proactivity. What is informed client leadership and what does good look like? And finally, we'll get to takeaways, tools and routes for you to get informed and to engage confidently with digital technologies, and actually to tell us and to tell the TechSig what it is you want and need from this conversation. We'll poll you again to understand where you are with that. And we'll then discuss what we want to achieve as a professional body and the opportunity for the sector to shape and drive this change. I'd love us to be open for questions throughout. Last time we had a great conversation, largely driven by your engagement, actually. So as usual, please post questions and comments throughout the session. And if I can ask you to use the Q&A box for comments and for questions this time, rather than the chat function, that just enables all of us to see everything in one place to make sure that we're addressing what you're saying. And if you prefer to remain anonymous, just type anon before your question and I won't say who you are. I should also say that we're recording today's session, so you can access it on catch up if you want to listen again, or if you have to leave before the end. Right, I think I've gone on long enough. Let's meet today's expert panel, who are Gordon, Nick and Andrew. And I think it's worth saying for today's subject matter that we have FM standards royalty in our midst. I'm probably too polite to calculate the combined years experience in FM standards on this call, but we are exceptionally fortunate to have this expertise in our community. So thank you all and welcome to all of you. And perhaps we'll go in that order, starting with Gordon, then Nick, then Blake, then Nick, then Andrew. Who are you and what do you do very quickly? Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Gordon Mitchell. I'm co-founder of a company called Holus, which is bringing AI and information management to FM. And I'm also the Technology Special Interest Group Chair. And as Jenny alluded to, I have roles with British standards, European standards, and international standards around digital data and technology. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Well done. Nick?
Likewise, looking forward to this. Good day, everybody. My name is Nick Blake. I'm an Associate Director within Gardner and Theobald, G&T, a a specialist FM consultancy. I spend a lot of my day procuring, strategizing FM. When I get some free time, I volunteer as the chair for BSI's FM technical committee, the committee that actually drafts the standards. I sit on the strategic committee, the one that tells us what to do, and the procurement and contract management SIG. I'm deputy chair of the IWFM's procurement and contract management SIG as well. So those are some of the things I'll be bringing to us today.
Well, thank you, Nick. I forgot to mention that you were deputy chair on that SIG, so that's really, really important, isn't it? And Andrew, please.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm Andrew Gladstone-Heighton. I'm the interim head of policy and insight here at IWFM. My role is really key in connecting the expertise and passion and insight of our speakers to decision makers and stakeholders to really showcase the best of what the sector can do. And in this field, I have a background in procurement and regional government, but I am an enthusiastic amateur and very keen that we leverage the expertise today to make material changes. So what can you take away today to really make the adoption of information management across your organisation? So looking forward to it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, all of you, and welcome again. Shall we go to our first poll? I think it's a great place to start, and we'd like to ask you how you rate your current awareness of the key programmes, standards and frameworks shaping digital practice. Now, it's quite a long poll, so we'll give you a minute to read through and answer, because it's really good to understand where you are. And I suppose, Gordon, really, while our audience is doing that, standards sound quite boring. I'm just going to challenge you on that. Just tell us why they're so important.
I mean, one of the things that I quite often kind of reference is in very simplistic terms, if you're, wanting to use a power adapter, say, then, the standards are there to mean that if you go to different countries, if you might add an adapter to the end of your UK socket, but when you plug it in to Germany or Argentina or wherever you happen to be in the world, you want it to work. And that's a very simplistic example, but for FM, we want it to work. So without standards, it's very difficult to drive that consistency. It does sometimes seem quite boring, but if you flip it on its head and think, how do I accelerate my competence and bring more capability at scale, then that starts to sound quite empowering. So it's really important for our sector to have these standards so that we, as a collective profession, we can really increase the value proposition of what FM is.
Thanks, Gordon. And actually, they're anything but, from the sound of it, they're actually pretty critical to helping us to get things to work really in different spheres. Using your most basic example, I think everybody can relate to that in some way. Shall we have a look at whether we've got a result yet from our poll? Oh, here we go. Actually, quite a good spread. So, current awareness of key programme, standards and frameworks shaping digital practice in FM. Most of our audience have responded that in terms of awareness in name only, so heard of a few. Getting involved, so I've used or referenced some frameworks in practice, and then we've got a couple of people actively applying, and then a couple of people really not aware of anything at all. So we've got a kind of shallow arc of understanding, I would say, with virtually nobody contributing or using or influencing in their organisations with these frameworks. So we can say that we've got a kind of perfect audience for really starting off to understand what this journey is. Gordon and Nick, what do you make of that finding? Has it surprised you?
Nick's on mute.
Oh, I can see
you. Yes, I keep forgetting that. I do really good behaviour. No, I find that exciting. I think that's really good, because it means the people who are listening to us now have places to go. They're not at the end of their journey. They've got places to go, and that's exactly why they're joining us. So no, I think that's really, really good. And if people are interested in influencing adoption or getting to that expert level, shaping and implementing these standards, I think Gordon and I would be more than happy to chat to them and take them on that journey. If this is something that if that's the next step, that would be a great outcome from this little session.
Yeah, I think that's right, Nick. And actually, that's just really the level of understanding that we've got in the room is actually a perfect way into having an exploration, Gordon, and perhaps you can take us through of what actually are the really important standards in this area and how they're relating to the transformation that we think the sector is capable of driving here.
I mean, for me, anyway, I think at the moment it's the most active I've seen FM in standards. We've got a number in the UK being worked on. We've got some at Europe and again new ones at international level. So it's a really vibrant space. But as we kind of unfold the conversation today, it'll be quite interesting to see if if there's an interest in being involved, but just a lack of understanding of how to, for those bottom two kind of tiers. But it's also about, there's a value in us understanding even someone who's not aware at all, getting their perspective on it. Again, why not? It's the why in all of this, and ultimately from standards work or the institute itself, we're all here to kind of elevate our profession. So clearly that's about our people. So getting to the answers of the why would ultimately, even if you're on that very top one and unfamiliar with anything, then bringing some of that understanding into our work's actually relevant and helpful as well. Because if you see no value in standard A, B, or C, then there's no point in us working on stuff that no one's going to use. You know what I mean? So, I mean, at the moment we've got digital going on all over the place. We've got in the UK some really interesting standards, workplace strategy, as well as a new digitally orientated soft landings. So these are things that we're all, really kind of familiar with, but going all the way into how does FM start to leverage information models and artificial intelligence, digital twins, all of this stuff that's going to heavily change and influence our sector and our profession. So these are kind of some of the activities, even through to area and space measurement, a new European standard, which is really technical. But how does FM start to work with the world of BIM and things like that? That's what that standard's trying to tackle. So yeah, I think it's, there's entry points for everyone to get involved in this work, and some of it might be, you start with a special interest group in the institute, and you kind of dip your toe in the water and start to meet people, have conversations, and then, over the course of time and based on your experience, you might then, as Nick says, want to move into the standards world. And both Nick and myself there's no point in writing a standard on your own. It's got to be a collaboration and a conversation, and everyone's got value to bring to that from their own unique perspective.
Can I jump in right there and say, Gordon, yeah, you cannot write a standard on your own. And that's one of the things that makes them stand out. Being British, I can be incredibly proud of the fact that we are the first standards organization in the world. We're founding members of sort of the grouped standards organizations. It's really, really a sense of pride. So 100 and something years we have had our standards organization. We are taking standards. I mean, this is an introduction to what standards are. Standards, as Gordon said, we cannot write them on our own. We need to have an understanding of, for a British standard, the whole of the country. And this is what makes standards great. We will write them, and then we put them out for completely public scrutiny. And it is the whole of the public that can get access to and scrutinize these standards. Now, I'm going to talk at some point about the procurement and contract management's standard. It's guidance, it's industry guidance. The way that works, again, people with knowledge in the field will sit down in a room and put together the ideas, their learnings, their experience, and it's reviewed within that group and outside of that group. So it's peer reviewed by people who haven't drafted it. That all happens with standards, but they take it a step further and they put this out for full public consultation. So that's that sort of extra layer. You're only allowed one standards body per country to go into the sort of group things, the European or the international side of things. And I'll tell you more about the standards that we're writing when we get on to the next question. But the standards really do stand out above some of the other guidance that you might find. They're not going to give you all the answers because they can't, but they will get you 50, 60, 70, 80% of the way to where you need to be, and you can just fine tune the last little bits to your needs. That's the purpose of standards.
Well, thank you both of you. And actually, what you've explored and unpacked for us there, Nick, is actually a hugely democratic process. So it's a standard, literally a standardization, but it's actually a democratic process in the way that people can contribute to these things and that they can come together and actually you get a consensus then, understanding of what something is. So, and then it's just like a massive benchmark. So perhaps we can move on to really just exploring, well, before we move on to the next slide, I'd like to really just explore for people who are not into this, what are one or two things that they should look at, what are one or two standards that they should really focus on in this space. But actually also to invite our audience, if there's a Gordon went to the key question there, which was why, if you're not engaged in this, why, if you want to be engaged in this, why, perhaps we can get some comments in the chat or in our questions box about how people have come to this or what it is that they would really like to know from this. One comment that's come in, which has asked, I'm not sure whether this is a cheeky comment, Alan, from you, but it says, is this the end of SFG 20? I don't know whether anybody would like to comment on that. Alan's actually given a sense of where they might be coming from on this, and I can see you smiling, Nick. Do you want to just react to that?
Well, the SFG 20, they do call themselves a standard. We've worked, IWFM, SIG have worked very closely with BISO SFG team on some work we were doing quite recently. So it came out last year. We saw a gap in the market, and that was understanding compliance. I know there's other webinars on this, but the SIG worked with people like SFG 20, CIBSE, BISRIA, and obviously internally with IWFM, other stakeholders, consultants, service providers, to actually work to get a unified understanding of compliance. Now, I say about that just to let people know that there is an IWFM-led industry accepted definition of compliance now, but also to say that we were working really closely with SFG. So it helped to understand that. I work in procurement and I find SFG really, really useful for that that purpose, procurement. It's very easy to do that apples and apples comparison using SFG. We're going to start talking about the informed client. We're going to start talking about data. We're going to talk about how digital works. And that opens up the ability to do things like business focused maintenance. So this is where you can work out what is important to your business. An asset, a light has not been installed to be a light. It's been installed to allow you to work at your desk, to do a function, to operate on someone if it's a operating theatre light. The light has been installed for a purpose. And BFM, rather than just doing an interval-based approach, as in it's a week since you've last checked the light, go and check the light again. It has a look at what's important to the business. How important is that particular light? What is the history of that light? It takes it down to that level of detail. And then we start talking about predictive and prescriptive maintenance. where the asset can actually tell us what it needs and when it needs us. And this is where it all opens up. If we can have a nice sort of accessible, standardized way of getting that information, it makes it a lot easier for people to be able to make those informed decisions based on the data.
Thank you, Nick. And actually, Gordon, that's what you've talked so passionately about, haven't you, as well, which is it's not the thing, it's the outcome of the thing, or it's the purpose of the thing. So it's not focusing on the actual tool or the actual, in your example, the light, it's what the light is enabling to happen in the business. And that's the how you get to the, we're probably getting ahead in our conversation, but that's how you get to the outcome of the thing you're trying to achieve. And then you think about it differently. And that's actually the gold dust of what the FM capability is, I guess, isn't it, really? It's that thing. Can we just move on to, sorry, go on, Gordon. If we just move on the slide, because I'd like us just to touch on what a couple of things are. Thank you, Lucy. And Gordon, please just react to that.
I mean, not trying to depress your afternoon, but it's not going to get rid of SFG 20. But what I think these things will do is force SFG 20 to change. And I think in the Q&A piece, Alan's already alluded to that. And I know the guys, the digital sort of director, he works on some of my standards groups as well, and they're already looking at how they sort of embrace what Alan's alluded to in the second question. How does SFG 20 start to work with the technology? So becoming more integrated in your overarching digital ecosystem or design. So I think it's...
And I don't know if you play with it at all in your day job, but we sort of skirt around the periphery. I understand their new system will allow the changes that you make. You take away a frequency, you alter a time. That is something that will stick. And that's a sort of digital change that is needed for this flexibility. As we develop more understanding of what we need to do, these systems, SFG 20 probably, as you say, will be staying, but they need to adapt. They need to be able to take these new inputs and retain them.
Well, I mean, whether ultimately what we're seeing at the moment on the screen is about information management. So whether it's SFG 20 or your own expertise and opinion and knowledge of your stock and your assets, you in your information environment, you want to capture these things because it makes you more resilient, more proactive, more informed, all these things that help you in the day job. So SFG 20 is, it's getting a lot of time on this conversation so far, but it's just it's an array of information that helps you with your maintenance of your assets. So there's no way FM doesn't want to be the best at maintaining what's in our scope and our remit. So whether it's SFG 20 or some other approach, it should be found in your information model somewhere.
And used like the rest of our standards. I mean, their overarching introduction says, look, this is generic. It needs to be adapted. It's your starting point. It's the thing I was talking about before. It gets you 50, 60, 70, 80% of the way. And then you need to do your own expertise, your own twist on it to bespoke it for your needs.
Well, thank you for that. And actually, Alan is happy, I think, Alan, if I can speak for you here. He says, okay, I'll settle on it adapting. And he's actually going to put his view forward to the rest of the audience who won't have seen his comment. It's Alan says, I see the revelation of smart monitoring, sensor equipment, big data, rigorous manufacturing as a way of moving towards a live system for FM monitoring. So it sounds like the thinking is all in the right direction. And Alan's just saying, I'll be happy for it adapting. And to your point, Nick, it'll get you some of the way there, as a lot of these things will. And then you've got to get yourself over the line with adapting. And as I think,
Jenny, before you leave this, the one thing I would say is, as this array of smart tools kind of increases, and this is where someone like SFG20 becomes maybe vulnerable, and it could see the end of it in its current state, is your building is going to start talking to you. IoT, if you've got the right models and the right understanding of your particular HVAC system, and you've got the right sensors on it, then you move to this predictive or conditional based approach to maintenance, and then actually you don't need the SFG20 kind of input, because the building and its data's got its finger on the pulse. So you still need that information in your information model to have the building talk to you in the right way. But as Nick alluded to, every building's slightly different. Even your next door neighbor, there will be differences to you. Never mind if you're in Germany or Australia, the differences in the kind of scale. But yeah, the bottom line is the data needs to be there. But like I said earlier on, whether it comes from an IoT sensor or whether it comes from a subscription to an industry standard, it doesn't really matter. But you definitely need to have that in place, as it were. So the world is changing and the tech is growing, and with things like Internet of Things coupled with artificial intelligence, it's going to tell you how to maintain your specific stock in ways that SFG20 can't even get anywhere near today.
And is going to offer cost savings. So yes, it's probably more expensive to put a few cheap sensors in, slightly, something that might get value engineered out, but over a longer period, knowing that you, I don't know, don't have to replace the filter 3 months, you've got an extra month, that's saving over years, and it's that kind of thinking that needs to be brought in, the whole life performance.
Thank you. Actually, just looking at the comment on this slide here, there is a really high recognition, isn't there, that about the opportunity of data-driven techniques, the opportunity of this to drive growth, but and perhaps as an indicator that we saw in our slide, real skills gaps in some of these areas, and a real need, and we can come on to what it is that people really feel that they want to kind of get as good as they can be in this area. You've talked, Gordon, as well, just about information management, the move towards information management. How massive is that in terms of a drive forward to transform what FM can do and to really evolve in this area?
I mean, you don't know what you don't know, as the saying goes. And in this scenario, and as we're talking about the informed client, this isn't about giving the client a stick to hit you with or anything like that. The informed client's very much more about FM being able to very clearly showcase its value, and therefore probably get more attention, more respect, more budget even from the client, because it sees FM no longer as a cost center, but as a value center. So it's you can have your opinion, fine, everyone's got one, but if you can get your information very holistic, very whole life, then you can leverage that time and time again for business cases, for budget extensions, for all these things that we all want within our FM operation. But if you're just trying to say, well, it's just because that's what I think, that's not a very compelling business case. So I think it's critical, not just for us to drive the day-to-day operational excellence, but it's critical to put in front of the C-suite so they truly understand this is what FM brings to the table. And actually, we want you sitting at the top table because we now understand the value you bring.
You can start small and start simple, right?
Yeah, well, I said to yourself a few days ago, some of this can be as simple as having a naming convention on your Excel files or your Word documents, so that it's something as simple as when I'm looking for something that I did 6 months ago, I can find it quickly. That might not You might not think that's digital transformation, but it is. So there's something everyone can do today to make your life easier, to make your value greater. It doesn't really matter, but this isn't about getting, robots powered by AI doing dynamic digital twins. Some of this stuff sounds a bit sci-fi if you go to the nth degree of it, but some of it's just about pragmatic foundations to make your day an easier gig.
And we'll pull in from construction as well, because that example you've given, naming convention, when I'm not procuring and strategizing, I do operational advisor work, so soft landings work. And we see a lot of that. The document I was reviewing yesterday is all about how that naming convention must be laid out. Detailed information reviewed by the internal FM team. It's a refurbishment, this one. But the purpose being just that naming that Gordon talks about. Even if you do nothing else, you have prepared yourself for that to be instantly uploaded and accessible to some sort of common data environment. That is something that just opens up communications in our new digital world.
And that sounds very simple, Nick, but actually I myself only this morning have been conflicted by 2 different naming conventions in a Word file when I'd written the date beginning with the year and somebody else had written the date beginning with the day, and all of a sudden you've got a difference of having to stop, look at what it is you're seeing.
Standardization, Jenny.
Standardization. You kind of you think of it, you come to it in the abstract, or most people come to it in the abstract, and then you meet it very quickly in the reality. And what this is saying, really what you're saying, is these things are so important, because to think about a system or a structure or a way early and upfront, and start small or start at a point and then carry on with that consistency, has got the ability.
We've done half the work for you, Jenny. We've done half of it. We've done 80% of it. We've got standards that already do these naming conventions. So you have to go and read it. Sorry, but it's there for you, and then you adapt it to what you actually need.
But it's as well as that. I was speaking to someone yesterday at the digital construction event at the Excel, and they were saying to me they were picking up work from a colleague that had left, and they went into the folder for the file. It was quite an extensive piece of work that had occurred, and they went in and were faced with 2 files. One that said the name of the project, at the end, final version, and then the next one was the name of the project, final version 7. And they were left with this predicament of, do I now need to spend the next week digging into both of these files to understand which one was the final, or do I just take a guess and assume that the one that said final versus version 7 was later than the other one, and if the other X number of hours work that had gone into the wrong one was then going to get lost. So very simple things that we've all probably, I've not been able to find files in my own PC on occasion, and as I say, these are just little quick wins. But then if you start the habit of this continuous improvement methodology, then you will get to the digital twins and the AI and all these cool tech toys that are coming, out of the tech world. But you'll have the foundations that you can reliably move into this more digital, proactive led function and impress the hell out of the C-suite,
Absolutely. And I think I would love to throw that gauntlet down to our audience, to challenge anybody to find a document that doesn't have final, or at least more than one final in its name, because I can tell you that I've done that before now. And let's get on to our next question, really, which is about how organizations can align with best practice. We've touched on it already in this conversation, but the statement's there, isn't it? FM professionals who understand standards can lead with confidence in the digital area. And we've got a huge number of organizations that say standards can help improve trust, transparency, consistency. We get it, we get the memo. And we talk about 19650 on here, which I'm sure most people in our audience will know and love, or ideally both. But so few organizations are fully aligned with these standards. What's gone wrong, Nick? What's happened?
Well, there's three things that I would really like to pull out on this one, and no surprises for the first one. It's where you start. A lot of FM is outsourced, and when you procure that FM, even if you run an in-house team, you are probably, for example, outsourcing your lifts or your fire, or there will probably be some level of outsourcing. Now, whether you're at the 6 and 7 figure levels, or at the sort of 4 and 5 figure levels, doing it right is going to set you in the right direction. So it sets that baseline for the whole delivery of the service. Proper procurement should be given that dedicated time. When we work with our clients, we start a year and a bit before the procurement is actually going to happen. We do all that sort of background work with them to make sure everything is set up for the organization that we're procuring for. So if you're setting up a service, set it up for your current needs and future aspirations. That's where you'd start. That sets up those information flows. Once you've got those information flows, do something about them. We are currently redrafting our second most popular international standard. So BS, probably because we've got a British convener, a British person leading it. ISO for sure, because it's ISO. I don't know if it's going to get the EN in there in the middle, but 41012. So ISO 41012 is essentially talking about procurement, strategic sourcing and setting up of agreements. We are redrafting that now to bring it into the modern world. And what we're doing with all of our standards is we're not doing a digital section. It is really integrated and woven throughout the whole document. It's not a standalone thing. It's business as usual. So talking about how you need to plan to gather this data, how you need to be set up to manage it, to react to it, the reporting that's required, all these flows are needing to be set up right at the very beginning. And those are the first two things, the procuring it and the guidance on how to do it. The 2018, I think it is, older version is still available, but we are aiming for a 2025 version probably. It might be coming out early next year, but let's say this year for now. It's recorded. The third thing that I wanted to bring out was communications. If you have a look at any sort of FM standards organization, yourselves, IWFM, IFMA, one of the qualities we talk about in FMs is communications. We are incredibly siloed in our industry, and that's because we have expertise in really specific areas, and that's natural. But FM skills are really dragging that expert into this expert's area and letting that communication flow. So having the communications internally, externally, reporting, the alignment to some of the whether it's the cultural alignment, whether it's standards alignment, and making sure you share that feedback. So if we're looking to align with our best practice, how they cut down risk, it's having a look at what your future aspirations are, what the history is, how you can line that up with the standards. And really, my three wrap-ups are procurement, standards, and communications.
so much. Nick. It's so interesting what you were saying about this. I've never thought of FM as a siloed sector before, but we've talked, Gordon and Andrew, we've talked a lot about in our institute instance, you know, we've got a professional standards framework. It's pretty huge in terms of the things it covers. We've also got special interest groups, as you two know, because you're both leading lights in slightly different ones. And we're always looking for ideas and thoughts and reflections on how we can have the right facets of the right specialism touching the right thing to make sure that we can tap into the right expertise. And as you say, Nick, you know, procurement is a really broad area. It's a profession in itself, in a way. FM's a uber area. But the potential for optimization and alignment is really huge. Gordon, have you got a perspective on this question about aligning to reduce risk and really push for value and performance to complement Nick's perspective?
I mean, as Nick's mentioned a few times, the standards, you know, I am aware this is recorded and I do work on standards, but you know, if you don't need to get accredited, then you can just pick and choose what you take from these standards and use them to, you know, accelerate your own operating model. So as you've just mentioned, FM's such a broad church. We have to deal with so many disciplines within our kind of overarching remit. If all of a sudden, not only can you leverage the standards, but you can leverage them being updated as well. If, you know, 70–80% of your highly complex FM operating model can be basically taken from international or UK experts' work, and then you just have to top and tail that, you just become so empowered to drive towards that, you know, operational excellence and be almost liberated from some of the administration of the underpinnings of it. So it's, you know, it's sometimes put forward as very dry, but if you think of it in more in that way of just liberating you from the admin of your role and empowering you to, you know, embrace all the new cool great things that are coming out of FM's possibilities, then, you know, thinking of it like that, then all of a sudden, you know, I mean, unless you need to get accredited for particular tenders and whatnot, then, you know, this is really just giving you a whole body of knowledge that you can let other people maintain. And in all honesty, a standard can cost you, you know, £150. And depending on the scale of your operation, that could be just a drop in the ocean. So you really can piggyback on these, drop 10% of it because you don't quite like it or it doesn't work with your corporate approach. But then all of a sudden you're looking like an absolute global superstar with the amount of competence you can pull into your operating model.
So there's some really interesting things to reflect on there, because you're both saying the work has been done by other people. It's been done in a really democratic and open way. It's open source. You don't have to take all of it. You can take what you need, notwithstanding what accreditation you might be going for. But to a certain extent, if you just got, I don't know, to your points earlier, Nick, 20, 30, 40, 50%, you would be ahead. It's starting somewhere, and it will help you to build and right away to add value in there. And actually, there's then this question about how you, I suppose my question about if you can take some of it but not all of it, do you have to know all of it in order to know what you don't need?
What you're taking.
So,
Yeah, I mean, in some respects, it's worth reading the whole thing. But if you're just use a follow on from Gordon's example, and what you're saying as well, Jenny, for 150 quid, you are getting potentially international consultant expertise, day rates that wouldn't even maybe an hour of work, and you're getting hundreds of hours of these people's work for such a affordable price. Even if you are taking only that 20% that's the bit you focus in on. When we draft them, we recognize very, very much that people will probably look for a title and jump straight there. So while we don't want to repeat things, we'll kind of try and cross-reference important bits throughout the document, but it's written in a way that it's acknowledged that not everyone's going to read it top to bottom. Ideally they would, because that's it's all our work. We put it in there, it's intended that way, but equally we do draft it so you can pick up this one little bit, take that in context there, and just work with that tiny bit that you've cherry picked.
So it sounds like a really well kept secret from what you're from what I'm hearing, Nick. It's like, why isn't everybody all over this all of the time?
We don't see sales figures. We're told that BSI certainly is still afloat. We understand that ISO is doing its thing. So some people are, Jenny, but there are other ways to access standards. Online, there's all sorts of things going around that you can find your way into standards quite easily. Even if you're going through the official routes, it's only a few £100 for a standard. Absolutely. If people aren't already doing it, many others are. This is how you just get your step forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alan here is also, he's also mentioned, you'll have seen his comment about the importance of working towards compliance with standards. So you can actually use the adoption of standards or think about how important compliance is with standards as you work towards them to achieve a broader accreditation, or actually as a really important benchmark. And he talks about that, he gives an example of the Ministry of Defence as an approach being taken there, and also acknowledges, Gordon, your very, very important point about saving money, and you've both talked about the opportunity of saving money there by relying on these standards. So I just wanted to come on to this question about reactivity to proactivity and just dig into that a little bit, really, and going to a supplier-led approach in technology to really creating this data-informed client. How does this? I think we all recognise that the sector is and needs to evolve, but saying that sounds like a really big shift that people need to make culturally and in practice. What's your take, Nick, on how people make that shift and what needs to happen? How easy or difficult it is?
Depends how big a bite you want to take. So I get to work with people who have a lot of experience but not much digital infrastructure, not much experience, not much digital infrastructure, and the flip side, more structure than we see in standards, more information, and knowing how to get it and how to access it. I'm going to leave that last one out because they're well on the journey. For those who are sort of more towards the beginning side of things, yesterday actually I worked with someone probably at the extreme end after 2.5 years of working through what's the best strategy, what's the best way to procuring something. Yesterday was that kickoff mobilization meeting. So really, I'm still on a bit of a buzz for that. Big work. But this was a client that started with no information. When we were setting up what the client expectation needs, what the client expectations were around their information needs, saying, like, so how often, if we're doing a sort of a dial-in update, an API update to your CAFM system, how often do you want things updated? And so, monthly would be good. No, so sorry, we're talking live or hourly? What do you mean monthly? So, resetting those expectations. This is a digital world. The step that they've taken is a financial one. They have gone for owning their CAFM system. And that is something we are seeing in more procurements. I mean, it used to be mostly you'd rely on your outsourced provider to come in and they would do everything. And when we speak with our service providers, they're saying that's probably more normal for them, but it's getting closer to that 50-50 mix as time goes on. Owning that data means you can do what one of my favorite quotes is, or paraphrases is, Mr. Peter Drucker. You can't manage what you don't measure. If you've got direct access to those measurements, you can actually do something about them. You can make that informed decision. Otherwise, if you don't have that, by the time the information is collected and collated and processed and turned into something that can be reported, you're having a look at yesterday's reality as opposed to right now's challenges. And that is something that we need to address. So live or up-to-date information is really, really key. And that was a big financial step, owning your own CAFM system, but something that we're seeing starting to trend.
And I just wanted to comment on that, Nick, actually, because I think that is really fascinating in terms of taking control and empowerment. But actually, if you think about if you think about the operating environment, a lot of organisations are in at the moment. We've just seen it from our last Outlook survey. Organisations are operating in really tight budgetary environments. The tendency is certainly for organisations to want to contract stuff out, to want to offload it, and actually then the ownership goes somewhere else because it seems the cost, not value. So what is the conversation? Because that's the fundamental conversation.
You're absolutely right, Jenny. And the answer is the same as before.
Yeah.
Play it right. So getting back to procurement, making sure that from the outset, yes, you are buying in FM expertise. That's why you outsource. So let's use that. And as I said, we were chatting with the service provider yesterday. Of course, they're set up and know best how to run their own system, but they've got experience in the other one. Running your own system, so long as you have procured saying that the data must be fed to the client, that the reporting is tight, you know what you want, you know what you need to operate, making sure it's all structured and laid out, and there are incentives, penalties is what some people call them, but incentives and performance indicators to make sure that expectations are being met, actions, what to do if expectations aren't being met, making sure that the client is protected and getting what they're paying for. Absolutely, using someone else's data, as I say, that probably will be slightly less complex for the service provider. So great option. They're all great options. It's just make sure you set your expectations as the client right up front.
I need to thank you so much, Nick, for that. I just need to move us on to our next poll. I think finally, I'm just conscious of our time running through, and I think this is really about what our audience is seeing and thinking to enable them to do this. So absolutely to do that thing that you've just described, Nick, in terms of the most important enablers that will help clients and leaders become more informed, because that's, Andrew, and what we're trying to do at the Institute in terms of shaping and really, you made a lovely humble comment at the beginning, but really trying to enable professionals in our community to work through some of this stuff in terms of what we can offer. This is quite a long poll again. I should say also that if something you're not seeing here, you would like us to be offering or you would like to find, please write it down in the Q&A and we will pick it up and feed it back to our wonderful technology SIG and our other complementary SIGs too. We will also put that poll in our feedback so that if you wanted a little bit more time to ponder, we can do that. Another also interesting comment from Alan while we're doing that poll, which is the crossover of FM and data is difficult to find, but it's growing fast thanks to smart devices, IoT, manufacturing standards, etc., and innovators. And also makes a really important point about sustainability, because it proves the business case for investment in green technologies. And actually, Gordon, that is something you're always talking about, isn't it? It's the ultimate outcome that a lot of these things can help to drive in organisations, rather than the thing themselves.
I mean, ultimately what we're talking about is you've been able to do more for less. And if anyone's operations got colossal margins that they're incredibly happy with today, then great. But it's not the typical FM situation. So this is one way that you can, rather than having to cut costs, become better. And that's quite attractive when you start thinking about it in that regard. And that's one of the key functions of the Institute, is to empower all of our members to be better than they currently are. Had a few conversations with Andrew as he's new into this space, and a lot of what I'll let Andrew talk for himself, but a lot of this kind of it's quite interesting seeing and speaking to someone with those fresh set of eyes. But I think it's, from the IWFM point of view, it's very much about what do the people need kind of idea. There's no point in us being here for our own purposes and patting each other on the back. It's how do we empower all of you? But I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, Andrew.
Certainly, by all means. And again, it's about the narrative of the sector, isn't it? Just picking up on some of the comments around meeting a standard, aligning to a standard is powerful in terms of not exposing yourself to scrutiny, in supporting that international best practice. And, we should be proud of this sector. As Gordon's alluded to, I'm a relative newcomer, but you are the key facilitators of change within a business. And it's so important that we embed best practice, and they are relatively simple things we can do. I know later on in the slides we talk about.
That's the sound, Andrew.
Yeah, we have guidance around pursuing digital maturity, so you can go from that beginning level, which I don't think many of you said you were in the poll, right up to that level of maturity and that level of mastery across there, and we can handhold you through that. And I think once you've gone through that, you can then lead your business through that as well, and lead the clients you serve through that constant feedback. So it really is a virtuous circle in that regard. Should we see the poll results?
Yeah, let's see the results, Andrew. Thanks, Lucy. I think, what are you making of that, Andrew? Quite decisive on.
Very. So yes, simple guidance and practical case studies for real world use at 40%. I think that's it, really, isn't it? So
that's the time to remind people about our good practice guide coming out from hopefully end of this year. From the SIG.
Yep. So we have an information management good practice guide, as Nick's alluded to, in the works, coming out in October. We also have FM standards live on the IMI website, I'm led to believe. The work we've been doing with NEMA around that. Just seeing as well, there's a kind of pretty even split, isn't it, between training and upskilling to boost digital competence, better visibility of available standards, and stronger collaboration, which is what today's all about, isn't it? And getting that better informed client. And again, on that training and upskilling, we do have, even if you're
Gone again.
Muted. I'm just unmuting. There's also procurement guidance, isn't there, Nick? I think
yes,
we were
absolutely
coming out. Yes, absolutely.
Being rewritten, making that visibility and availability of standards, referencing, that's something that we are talking about very much as we're redrafting.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, and we have a tech survival guide, even for those folks who are real newcomers to this, or if you are looking to inform your client. work with the client and inform them, then, that's a real good sort of bite-size 3-part learning course to be able to do that. So again, hopefully responses to all of those poll answers there, but definitely, as Nick said, that showcasing in case studies is the most powerful narrative we have.
I was quite interested as well to see, and we can just, I'm conscious that we're slightly over time, but I will share the rest of the slides, and our audience can also have them to download the QR codes. But what's really interesting to have representation from our tech SIG and from our procurement and contract management SIGs on this call, Andrew, is also to see those interfaces and to see those overlaps, because we're looking to produce information management initiative guidance. We're working really closely with NEMA, actually, Gordon, aren't we, to develop the FM persona in this space, and we probably haven't had enough time to talk about that, but colleagues can look on the and our audience can look on our website for more about that and get in touch with us. But Nick, your point about the procurement updated guidance, which is taking account of changes in that area and also opportunities and how these things come together. And I suppose that's the connection that we want to try and make through our SIG work and through our institute work, is how these facets can come together so we can look at where one thing touches another and where another thing touches another, and not really, Gordon, as we've talked about so often, consider these subject matters as verticals and separate from each other. And conceptually, it's quite hard to do that when you feel like another thing and another thing. But it's so good to have an understanding from our audience of what you want and need, but also to hear, and I know Alan's been our star contributor today, and Alan, please don't ever apologise for contributing to one of our conversations, because we need enthusiasts, we need people who are real, really interested in this area. And if you're not already involved in our tech SIG, please come on in, because it's that kind of enthusiasm and engagement and curiosity that we really want to get underneath. Because we've really ranged in our conversation today from, have an even naming convention on your spreadsheet, please, everybody, to the work's been done and it's hugely democratized, to this is an opportunity to really empower. And I'm determined to come at you, Gordon, with a quote that you've said to me in the last couple of days, but FM is the whole life context setter for humanity in its natural state. That's really where we're really trying to get to in terms of outcomes and big opportunities that it can have. Lucy's very gently moving us on through the slides because she's looking at the clock more than I am. But here's the technology SIG. Its purpose is on the slide, you can see. I think anybody on this webinar will already realise that technology and the opportunity it presents is massive, significant and profound. So please do get involved with the SIG, whether that's Gordon, whether that's Hazel, who's giving us tech support today, but a very active member of the SIG. Please get in touch with them if you want to get involved. And there's the ways that you can do that too. I think, Andrew, you've already alluded to our training. Lucy, if you can move us through. Now, Gordon, you wrote this guidance, right? This is digital maturity pathway for smarter organisations. This is the guide that you need if you want to think about how to redefine the client role and all of the stuff we've been talking about today, to get data ownership, to move to dynamic performance insights from SLAs, and to use predictive analytics, and actually to create long-term value partnerships. And there was some quite interesting stuff you've talked about, Nick, and illustrated on collaboration and being a really good client in this space. So that's the guidance for you. I think the next slide, Lucy, is about our tech survival guides that Andrew referred to. There's a really good, there's really good member and anyone else value to be had out of these if you're just looking to dip your toe in the water. And actually, in our very first poll, we had a few people that were going, I'm at the beginning of this, as we did actually in our skills webinar. So you're not on your own. So get yourself on the tech survival guide training course if you do nothing else, actually, because I think that would get you on the journey. And then finally, just a plug for 2 pieces of research that we've done. I've quoted a bit from our Outlook survey report where we've done a tech special within that, and some of the data we've used today has come from. Have a look at that. It's really also showing you the top gaps in skills on the client side and service side, actually, technical proficiency. and technical proficiency. And again, on the service side, leadership and management. So the opportunity is massive to make a real difference. And then very finally, if I could ask you to take 10 minutes of your time to engage with our sustainability survey this year, which is just this week launched. And with there's quite a bit of shade going on around this agenda at the moment with the geopolitical environment. This is an area where through digital engagement, through information management, this profession can make a massive difference to the world. And I don't think that's an understatement. So please tell us what you think with our survey. And then finally, I'm going to give you a CPD code before thanking profusely our excellent expert panel today. It's Nick, Gordon and Andrew, you've been brilliant. We haven't had enough time, I think, to unpick all of this stuff with each of you. We could probably have gone to an hour and a half, but maybe we will come back and do some more webinars in this space, Gordon, Nick and Andrew, and also behind the scenes to Lucy and Hazel for tech and polling support. To our listeners, thank you so much for your time and input. Alan, in particular, you've been our star contributor, 10 out of 10 to you. A recording is available if you want to listen again. If you like what we're doing, please tell us what you liked and why. If you don't like it, please tell us what you didn't like and why. If you want to see us do something else, please tell us what. The poll will be renewed to you in the feedback. Please fill that in. If you want to ponder on what else you would like to see, you can also reach out to Gordon or Hazel. We're here to serve you, and this is the moment to help you set the SIGs and the Institute's agenda. Thanks again for joining us. Have a really good afternoon and have a really excellent week. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Well,